Imagine being at the peak of despair, with no hope, no prospects, just another face lost in the crowd. Now, imagine asking someone for just $1, expecting the usual indifference, but instead receiving a life-changing response. Sounds unlikely, doesn't it? But that's exactly what happened when Dave, a homeless man in Los Angeles, crossed paths with none other than Shaquille O'Neal. What began as a simple request for help turned into a journey of transformation, marked by surprising gestures and an impact Dave could never have imagined. Before discovering how this incredible story unfolds, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories that inspire and move. It was just another ordinary day in Los Angeles, with the frenzy of honking cars and hurried people, crossing the sidewalks of a city that never sleeps. Dave, a man whose face bore the marks of a hard life, wandered the streets. His empty gaze contrasted with the vibrant hustle around him. He was invisible to most, just another figure the city had grown used to ignoring. But that day, he summoned what little courage he had left and approached a tall, imposing and familiar man. "Can you spare $1?" he asked, his voice almost swallowed by the street noise. But this was no ordinary man. The figure Dave approached was none other than Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball legend, known as much for his commanding presence on the court as for his generous heart off it. Shaq stopped, something no one else seemed willing to do, and looked at Dave with curiosity. There was a moment of silence between them, as if the world around them had slowed for just an instant. Little did Dave know, his life was about to change forever. Shaq pulled out his wallet, but it wasn't the usual gesture of handing over a few bills or coins. He looked at Dave as if he could see beyond the worn-out clothes and tired face. "Tell me your story," he said, his voice both deep and gentle. The question caught Dave off guard. No one had asked him that in years. He hesitated, but began to speak, stumbling over his words as he tried to explain how he had ended up in such a dire situation. The exchange between them wasn't just a plea for help and a casual response. Shaq saw an opportunity. In that unexpected encounter, he saw a chance to do something different, something that went beyond a momentary act of charity. It was as if something in Dave had sparked an empathy in Shaq that he couldn't ignore. As Dave spoke, Shaq was already planning what to do next. "Come with me," Shaq said, with a smile that seemed to say more than words ever could. Dave, still in disbelief, hesitated for a moment, but ultimately followed the giant whose presence was impossible to ignore. Little did he know that simple decision would be the first step on a path of transformation he could never have imagined. Shaq took Dave to a steakhouse, a place filled with aromas Dave hadn't experienced in a long time. For him, just stepping into that space was extraordinary. The white tablecloths, the soft hum of conversations and clinking silverware, and the glow of plates being served created a surreal contrast to the harshness of the streets. Shaq, with his commanding presence, waved to the waiter and chose a table as if this scene were completely normal. Sitting across from each other, the two couldn't have been more different, at least at first glance. Dave, with worn-out clothes and a hesitant posture, seemed out of place. Shaq, towering and at ease, spoke as if he were catching up with an old friend. "Order whatever you want from the menu," Shaq said, sliding the menu over to Dave. Dave hesitated, looking at the options as if reading a book in a foreign language. After all, when was the last time someone offered him this? Gradually, the tension began to fade. Shaq asked questions, but they weren't intrusive. He wanted to know more about Dave, his life, his hopes. The once intimidating setting started to feel welcoming. The first dish arrived, and the silence was replaced by the sound of utensils cutting into tender meat. Dave tasted the first bite with a mix of hunger and reverence, savoring not just the food, but also a moment of dignity he hadn't felt in years. For Dave, that meal was more than satisfying hunger. It was a reminder that he was still human, that there was still someone willing to look at him and see beyond his appearance. Shaq, on the other hand, knew this was just the beginning. He wanted to show Dave that small acts of kindness could reignite something the world had long extinguished: hope. When the meal ended, Dave looked different. It wasn't just his body that was nourished. His soul seemed to have found some relief. Shaq stood up and with a smile said something that left Dave intrigued. "We're not done yet. Come with me." What would happen next? Dave didn't know, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a strange excitement for what lay ahead. Shaq took Dave to a spa. For someone who had grown accustomed to the harshness of the streets, that place felt like an alternate reality. The soft scent of essential oils filled the air, while relaxing music played in the background. Dave hesitated at the entrance, almost turning back, but Shaq, with his warm smile, gave him a reassuring nod. "Trust me," said the giant, with a calmness that seemed to dissolve any resistance. The first step was a hot shower. The water didn't just wash away the dirt, it felt as though it was cleansing years of hardship. As the water cascaded, Dave experienced a sensation he hadn't felt in ages: relief. That simple act seemed to restore something he hadn't realized. He had lost his dignity. Then came the haircut. The scissors snipped away, the razor tidied up his beard, and with each motion it felt as if layers of his past were being shed. When Dave looked in the mirror for the first time, he hardly recognized himself. He touched his face, almost as if to confirm it was real. Shaq, standing beside him, gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "Now you're starting to see what I see," he said, with a sincerity that left Dave speechless. It wasn't just his appearance that had changed, it was something deeper. For the first time in years, he felt like he could start over. The spa also provided clean clothes for Dave to wear, something simple but profoundly impactful. Each piece of clothing represented more than fabric. It was a reminder that he was still worthy of care. As he put them on, Dave's posture seemed to shift. His once slumped shoulders now appeared straighter, as though an invisible weight had been lifted. But Shaq wasn't finished yet. He looked at Dave with a serious yet kind expression and said, "This is just one part. Are you ready for the next step?" Dave didn't know what to expect, but for the first time he wasn't hesitant. He was ready to find out. Shaq took Dave to a clothing store. For most people, this might seem like an ordinary outing, but for Dave, it was like stepping into a world he thought was out of reach. The neatly arranged shelves, filled with fresh, clean clothes, starkly contrasted with the worn-out garments he had been wearing for so long. At the store's entrance, Dave hesitated, feeling out of place. But Shaq, with his reassuring presence, encouraged him. "Today, you'll dress the way you deserve." Walking through the aisles, Shaq spared no effort to make Dave feel comfortable. He picked out shirts, pants, and jackets, showing each item with enthusiasm and asking for Dave's opinion. At first, Dave only nodded timidly, but gradually he began to express his thoughts. "This jacket looks nice," he murmured, and Shaq, with a broad smile, responded, "Then that's the one we'll get." Every choice seemed to restore a piece of Dave's confidence. After trying on a few outfits in the fitting room, Dave emerged wearing a combination that made him look like a completely different person. The reflection in the mirror stunned him, and he struggled to hold back tears. Shaq, watching from nearby, simply said, "See, a man who believes in himself can achieve anything." The words resonated deeply within Dave, rekindling something he had long stopped believing in: hope. With shopping bags in hand and a renewed appearance, Dave felt something he hadn't experienced in years: belonging. The people in the store looked at him with respect, no longer as someone invisible. Every step he took seemed to carry a message that a fresh start was possible, even for someone who had hit rock bottom. More than just clothes, Shaq was offering him a chance to see himself in a new light. As they left the store, Shaq turned to Dave with a serious yet compassionate look. "Now that you're ready on the outside, it's time to start from the inside. Let's go." Dave nodded, unsure of what was to come. But for the first time, he was certain he wasn't walking this path alone. With new clothes, a fresh appearance, And confidence beginning to take root, Dave felt that something inside him had profoundly changed. Shaq, however, knew that the real impact of his help wasn't just in the actions taken so far, but in what would come next. They sat on a bench in a nearby park, away from the noise of the busy streets. There, amidst the trees and the distant sound of children laughing, Shaq broke the silence with a question that caught Dave off guard. What would you do if you had a second chance? Dave hesitated, almost uncomfortable with the depth of the question. He had never really thought about it. His life had been a series of daily struggles, leaving no room for dreams or plans. But as he looked at Shaq, he realized he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. I think I'd help others, people like me, the ones no one sees, he replied, his voice trembling with emotion. Shaq smiled as if he already knew the answer. In that moment, Shaq made a promise that Dave would never forget. Then do it. It doesn't matter what happened before. What matters is what you're going to do from now on. For Shaq, it was more than advice. It was a commitment to the ripple effect of kindness. He understood that transforming one life could create waves that reached far beyond what the eye could see. Those words planted a seed in Dave, something that began to grow right then and there. For the first time, he didn't just see an uncertain future ahead, he saw possibilities. Shaq continued, sharing stories about how small acts of kindness he had witnessed had brought about incredible changes in others' lives. You have the power to do that too, he said with conviction. As they stood to leave, Dave was no longer the same man who had asked for $1 earlier that day. He still carried scars, but now he had something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Shaq looked at him, gave him a firm hug and said, "Life gave you a second chance today. Don't waste it." And with that, Shaq said goodbye. But the impact of his actions was far from over. Stories like Dave and Shaq's remind us that a simple act can spark incredible change. It's not just about helping someone in the moment. It's about restoring dignity, purpose, and hope to those who need it most. Shaq's actions didn't stop with Dave. They created a ripple effect that could touch other lives through Dave's promise to give back. Now I ask you, how many times have you passed by someone on the street without truly seeing them? What if we all reflected on how we can make a difference, even with small gestures? Share your thoughts in the comments, spread this story, and inspire others to become agents of change. And if you love stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any. Here, we bring you moving and inspiring narratives that show the power of empathy and kindness. See you next time.